Great. Well, we'll go ahead and get started here. Thank you all so much for joining us for our Managing Marketing Data webinar brought to you by Socedo. I'm Adam Hutchinson. I'm our Demand Generation Manager here at Socedo. And I also run our marketing automation systems as well as our database and marketing ops kind of from end to end. And so, I literally go to sleep every night thinking about our marketing database. And I'm not kidding you. There have been more than one times where I've woken up in the middle of the night and thought to myself, oh crap, did this new field that we just turned on, did that affect my data quality? Did I just mess up my MQL definition because of this new campaign that I just turned on? And then I have to run over to my computer and check and make sure things are all going okay. Are there times I get into the office and I realize, we'll be in these strategy meetings and we'll be talking about how we want to build a lead scoring model, and we'll look at our database and just realize we don't have the data that we need to make informed decisions in marketing. And so we have to kind of start from scratch, and we have to find new ways to add data onto our leads. And so, this is a problem that literally I think about on a daily basis. I'm sure many of you do as well. I know any of you that are in the kind of the marketing ops world out there on this webinar can probably sympathize with my, middle of the night terrors when I wake up and think about, oh my gosh, my Marketo system has completely fallen apart or something. Trust me, it does happen. But hopefully after the webinar today, we'll come away with some good tips and a little bit more confidence in how we can actually manage our marketing database. So I want to start with kind of like a sigh of relief, and we'll talk about why this is a common problem. It's not just you, but there are some real reasons why marketing in particular has to deal with messy data, both from a quality side as well as a quantity side. We actually face some very unique challenges in marketing that customer teams, sales teams, and product teams don't actually face in the same way that we do. So we'll dive into that. We'll also be talking about, of course, the benefits to managing a good database and really why we're here on this webinar. What we're talking about can be kind of complex. It can also sometimes seem futile. It's like, oh, why do I really care that this field is accurate? My number of employees field is accurate to the actual integer rather than just groupings of 10. But it really does make a difference, and so we'll dive into some reasons why good data can help inform targeted marketing campaigns and really increase conversion rates on your database. I'll definitely share some examples about how we're doing things here at Socedo. My caveat as we start this presentation is that we are not experts here at Socedo, but we do have some best practices, especially with our own system, being that we actually append data into marketers' databases from social media. We've had to think a lot as we built our own product around how are marketers actually going to use their data effectively, and how do we want to add new data to a database in a way that's going to be usable and also not detrimental to the quality of the data. And finally, of course, we'll talk about social media in particular and why over the past few years social media has presented a lot of new problems for marketers in their data, but also a huge amount of benefits as well. And hopefully you're not scared away by the problems, and we can actually find more pros than cons when it comes to social media data. We will have plenty of time for questions at the end, and I'll be able to get through most of them, but please do submit your questions as we're going along. So first of all, you are not alone. Trust me. I am a member of all of these statistics here. So Demand Metric is a research firm and survey agency that actually creates custom surveys on behalf of other companies and finds market research trends and develops these reports based off of them. So this is one from earlier this year around how marketers actually acquire data into their systems. And one section of the report was focused specifically on data quality, and the findings were very, very shocking. And I just came across this with my team members a few weeks ago, and what we found was that 3/4 of marketers know that purchasing outside data or adding third-party data is important in their marketing systems. It helps them qualify their leads, helps them find new leads. It also helps them enhance the quality of the data that they have on their leads and standardize their job titles, their company names, et cetera, et cetera. So bringing third-party data into your system is a good thing. Everyone is doing it, so you shouldn't be scared by it, but it does present some problems. And when those problems come up, they actually interfere with revenue. unfortunately. And so that's why this can, add a little bit of a scary component to this. 80% of marketers say that problems with their data is actually directly interfering with their sales and marketing efforts, which of course comes back to the bottom line is impacting revenue. For example, internally, when if we set up certain MQL qualification fields incorrectly, all of a sudden I'm sending bad leads over to sales, which means they're focusing their time on bad leads instead of the good leads, which means now our conversion rates are a lot lower, which means we're not selling as many packages of Socedo, which means, of course, we're not bringing in as much revenue. So even something as simple as correct field updates on things like number of employees in a company, or active on Twitter, or whatever it might be that we're listening for, all those fields, if we get that wrong, it actually goes all the way down to the bottom line. And sometimes it can be up to 2 or 3 weeks before we realize that that problem exists. And now all of a sudden we have a 2 to 3 week backlog of bad leads going over to sales, which is not a pretty place for a company to be in. So it does have a direct impact on your overall business. Over half of marketers actually don't have a way to ensure data quality, which is why a lot of those problems can persist over time without us really knowing that it's a problem. And so rather than having standard checks in your data, creating kind of workspaces and barriers in your data flows and in your databases to stop updates to certain fields that could detriment your actual lead quality and your data quality. Over half of marketers don't really have anything like that in place, which means if their data gets screwed up, if they have some bad data in their system, it could just persist until the end of time. We also know that data goes stale very quickly, and if you're not checking in on it, if you're not updating your data over time, you could be, have data from 12 months ago that's already out of date. People change jobs, they change job titles, companies change what systems they're using, et cetera, et cetera. Finally, this demand metrics survey also looked at 3 different areas on data quality. They looked at complete lists of data. Do we have everything on a lead record that we would need? They looked at recency of data. How often did we acquire it? Is this data still up to date? And just accuracy. Is this correct, or is it false information that we're getting? And the average rating on marketers that they give to their own database is less than 50% in each of these categories separately. So they rank the completeness of their data less than 50% in terms of quality. Thankfully, I think here at Socedo we're above 50% in each of these areas, but it is still something that we struggle with, and I'm sure a lot of people struggle with as well. And there's some very key reasons for it. One, as marketing, we sit throughout the whole funnel, but we're here at the top of the funnel before any other system in our business. And most businesses have their marketing system kind of sitting to capture everything first, and then things trickle down. So if you think about it in terms of like Marketo might capture everything from our channels, Salesforce might actually only capture the leads and the lead data that we need, and all the way down into our actual customer database in terms of your SQL database or wherever you're keeping that, only has our actual core key information that we're actually using within our customer base. And so often marketing is tasked with owning data at the very top of the funnel, where things are coming in through a variety of sources with a variety of quality. So of course there's our first party data, the data that we actually own, and this is the data that we gather through our own form fills. This is the data that people are giving us directly. Usually this is coming through form fills on your website. Someone downloads a white paper. We capture all of that information. You attended this webinar, and in order to attend, you filled out a registration form, and I got, I think, 6 different fields on you for registering for this webinar. And so that's all great. That's first-party data that I have. Usually that's my best data. But of course, if any of you lied on one of those form fills, if you said that your company size was 2,500 employees, but you only have 25 employees, all of a sudden I have inaccurate data. We can also get direct first-party data, of course, through sales conversations, through meetings, through events that we then pump into our systems. Then, of course, there's the third-party data that we buy, like just purchasing lists or doing data enrichment through different data providers. And then finally, there's data through different interactions and behaviors where we're always tracking, like social media. Or, of course, the amount of time you spend on this webinar is technically a data point that I'll be pumping into my systems. And finally, we integrate our systems in marketing really across the entire stack. And so if you think about it, we use a communication tool called Intercom here at Socedo that integrates with our own app. And when people are using Socedo, messages pop up, and we can also track how people are interacting with our product through Intercom. And so that integrates all the way back to Marketo and also into Salesforce through Marketo in order to say this person's engaged with our product, this person's not, here's where they are in their free trial experience. All of that data is really useful for us to know on the marketing side as well as the sales side, of course. But that's coming through this other system, Intercom, which might be using data or qualifying things in a different way than my systems are. So all of these different variety of sources then have to converge into my database, which, my database is held in Marketo. For some people, it's in Salesforce. All of these things have to come together into one place with various qualities. Even purchasing a list, I might know that the email addresses on that list are 90% accurate, but the job titles might be out of date by 6 months. Whereas the people who are filling out forms, they might update their job titles correctly, but they might lie a little bit about how big their company is or something like that, which does happen, unfortunately. So you have to find a way to bring all these things together. The other problem with marketing specifically is that we live in the world of unstructured data. Sales gets the benefit of having direct calls with people, and they're looking for some specific requirements. They have some unstructured data as well. They like to talk to people about what are your interests, what are your use cases, how are you currently running your business, and they put those into fields in Salesforce. But for the most part, their database and the sales side of things is pretty straightforward. It's pretty regulated. From a product and engineering and customers perspective, our database is very structured. The data fields that the product team and the customer team is looking at is, what's their company size, what's their trial length, how much are they paying us for their use of Socedo, how many times have they logged into the app, very numerical type pieces of data. In marketing, we have to look at unstructured data, just simply meaning things that don't fit into actual numerical classification, or there's not just a set number of terms that people can select from in terms of this data. It could be wild sentences, interests. It could be inferred data. It could be anything that doesn't fit nicely into a little field in my database. And so job title is even one of them. In marketing, we gain job title as a field from a variety of different sources, and people call themselves different things. So this is actually a screenshot of our own app to look at the way that we search for different leads on Twitter. And you'll see here we have to have even variations in our job title because the way people talk about themselves and their own jobs is not standardized. So someone might call themselves a CMO or a head of marketing. They might be a chief strategy officer, or they might be a CSO. It might be the community director, or they might be the head of social media. All of these different job titles actually have a wide variety of variations in them. Even further than that is interests. Marketing, we have to know what people are interested in and kind of what their pain points are. None of that is actually captured through a standardized set of values. We have to be able to capture that interest in a lot of different ways. So we look at what are people talking about? How do you capture that into a field in a way that's usable? We talk about how often they're interacting with maybe influencers or competitors. And then we have to find a way to quantify that and put that into a field in our database. We have to look at things like what did they view? What content did they view on our website in order to infer interest from that? And then we have to try to put that into some sort of structured way in our database. And so that comes up with a lot of complexities as well. It's all doable, but whatever we choose and the way that we consume that data is going to kind of determine what decisions we can make off of it. If I'm just counting how many times someone views a certain web page, well, that's a number and that's really great. It tells me frequency. But does it tell me how long that they engaged with that piece of content? Well, not really. So does it give me interest, or just does it give me kind of their repetitive interest in this topic? I don't know. Finally, company name is a really interesting one here. Most people don't necessarily consider this unstructured data. It's a company name. It's pretty set. You just put it into a field. But unfortunately, even company name can be somewhat nebulous. A lot of people add prefixes or don't add the suffixes, to their company names, like LLC. Would you add that or not? Amazon, people call themselves, oh, I work at Amazon, or they say I work at Amazon.com. Well, in my database, those are two different things, unfortunately, but I need to find a way to marry those together. Also, there's a huge rise, especially from the early 2000s, of everyone including .com in their name, and so that comes up with a lot of issues as well. Or even something in terms of how we're formatting our name. If someone includes the word "and" in their company name, it can either come in as the word "and" or as an ampersand. Now, there's a lot of tools out there now that help us standardize that, but that's still something that we have to look at and be aware of. Then there's also the problem of our multiple databases. In marketing, again, like I mentioned before, we have to connect a lot of different areas together in order to make our data work. And a lot of systems don't necessarily play nicely together. So for marketing ops people, especially if you're using Marketo, this one's probably has caused you a headache at some point in your career, trying to integrate Marketo with Salesforce. At Socedo, just a quick story here, we actually brought on Salesforce after Marketo, which is not typical. Most people have Salesforce first, they roll it out to their sales team, and then they add Marketo on top of it. We kind of went in the other direction, and we encountered some problems. We had a database of all of our leads in Marketo, but we didn't really know who they were. We didn't know if they were, we had some fields marked about whether someone was a customer or whether someone was just a lead or someone was a trial user and who they were assigned to, but that's about all we knew. Translate over to Salesforce, where Salesforce actually uses a multi-object structure in its database. So if you think about it, Salesforce has leads, they also have contacts, they have accounts, they have opportunities, and all of those are actually different objects that reference each other. And so you can't have, a lead and a contact. Your lead becomes a contact. Whereas in Marketo doesn't make a distinction between those two things. Marketo just says a lead is a lead is a lead, and we can have a field that classifies it a little bit differently. So trying to get those two systems to work together, believe it or not, is still a headache for me. We brought on Marketo. We've had it for about a year now. We brought on Salesforce though just back in March, and I'm still trying to make those two systems talk nicely to each other. It's a bit of a pain. Then there's also this whole problem around how different systems are consuming data in their fields. So if I have something that's a string field, just kind of like a random set of letters and numbers. It could be anything. It could be a word. It could be a sentence. It could just be a random combination. If I have something that's a string field over in Marketo that's saying maybe the what technology they're using. We listen a lot to, is someone using Marketo, HubSpot, or Pardot, one of the systems that we integrate with. We keep that in a string field in Marketo. Pretty simple. But that data actually comes into me through a third-party data provider that brings it in as an array, meaning multiple values within a single set, within a single lookup. And so I have multiple values now that I have to try to put into one field. That's not technically possible. So instead, I have to split up that array that I'm getting through a third-party database with all the different technologies they use, select out the ones that I want. Okay, you use Marketo. I want to put that into this field over here called Marketing Platform. Or, oh, I see you're using Google Analytics. I want to put that in this field over here called Analytics Platform. So that's a bit of a complexity right there when you try to integrate systems together, or even something as simple as a string field over to an integer, which does happen sometimes. And so like number of employees is one that I see often within databases, and something that we have here. Half of the fields that I don't own in marketing, that owns by another team, they capture a number of employees through a selector field, where someone selects, I have 1 to 5 employees, or 6 to 10, or 11 to 50, etc., etc. They select those values, and those values come over to Marketo as a string, as a random, kind of a set of letters and numbers that say actually 1 to 10. Well, unfortunately, the field that I'm actually using in Marketo is just a number field. It's just an integer. I can't have 1 to 10 in that field. I need to pick a number and say 5 or 2 or 11. And so I have to find a way to convert that string field over to an actual number, and I have to pick one. So if they come in with 1 to 5 employees, I need to pick, is it 1 or is it 5 that I'm going to put into that field? So that also adds another level of complexity to this on the marketing side of things. Now sales is lucky because sales takes whatever we create in marketing in our database and we just pump it over to Salesforce and they consume it and they're happy. They don't really care. And once things get over to customer success and they go into our customer database, everything's kind of locked and loaded and no problem. In marketing, we have to consume all these different data sources together and try to make it coherent so that we can actually use it. The thing is, if we put in this effort, if we create a marketing database that it's actually manageable, that we can actually use, that has both the quantity of the data we need, but also in a qualitative way that we can make informed decisions off of, we get to do some really cool things with it. So one is we get to actually be more accurate with who our leads are. We can qualify them better, and we can enable lead scoring to move them down the pipeline and understand who our best leads are, who our worst leads, and where they're moving through our pipeline. We can also create actual gates within qualification. So here at Socedo, we have a qualification saying if you're going to be a lead that I can pass over to sales, you have to have at least 5 employees. You can't just be a one-man operation out there, running a blog or something. That's great, but you're not going to be able to use Socedo. And so I need to know exactly how many employees you have at your company if I'm even going to call you an MQL and be able to pass you over to the sales team. I also need to know what marketing automation system you're using. If you're using Marketo, HubSpot, or Pardot, one of the systems that we integrate with, you're all of a sudden eligible for a much different aspect of Socedo than other people. You can actually do an integration with those. You can do social lead monitoring. You have a lot of options available to you. So I want to make sure you to go to the sales reps that actually know how to sell those products. If you don't have one of those systems, you might still be a good customer for Socedo, but your trial experience is going to be very, very focused on lead generation and that aspect of our product. And so I want to make sure you get into the right kind of trial experience and I send you over to the right salesperson. So when I have actually those data points correct and updated in my systems, I can send you to the right people through my lead routing and also enable higher conversion rates for my sales team. This also gives me, in my funnel, I can open up all of these different actions to be able to qualify someone as interested. Rather than just someone filling out a form for a white paper or attending a webinar to know that they're interested, if I'm collecting data from all these different sources, I can start to say someone who visited a blog post that was bottom of the funnel will get an increased lead score. Or if it's top of the funnel, a slightly less lead score. I can say if you engage with us on Twitter in one of our bottom funnel keywords that we're tracking, I know that you're probably interested in our product and I can actually increase your lead score and send you closer to sales. I can also look at the difference between registering for a white webinar or attending a webinar, between just looking at a case study and actually downloading a white paper on something. I can see, did you visit the pricing page or did you actually request pricing? And this is really difficult because I have to keep those two things separate. I have to listen to all these actions and use them in a way that I can actually do lead routing off of it, lead scoring, and keep it updated. But once I do, it means I can actually pass more leads over to sales because I have more data. Now this is of course the kind of big golden opportunity with a good marketing database is your reporting. So as marketers, we all want to prove ROI. We all want to know what's working, what channels we should be focused on, and how much revenue we're driving over to sales. But in order to do that, I have to, of course, be tracking different actions along the way. At the very first step, I need to know what are my acquisition programs, how are leads getting into my system, and then track that all the way down the funnel. And so I have a field that's called acquisition program name, and if that field gets messed up, all of a sudden, my first touch attribution model kind of goes out the window, and I don't know, did my webinar leads perform better than my white paper leads? Does promoting something on social media work better for me than through paid search? I have no way of knowing if this isn't set up correctly. But once it is, I can actually make informed decisions based on investment. I can go all the way down the funnel and say, hey, paid search converts twice as fast as leads who come in through through a webinar or something, and then I can make a solid investment in the next month into paid search. Finally, throughout my database, I actually need to standardize the way that I'm tracking members of different campaigns and how they're consuming my content if I want to do multi-touch attribution, which I do. Because if I enable multi-touch attribution, all of a sudden I can track the success of a program not just by bringing me leads, but actually accelerating deals through the pipeline. I can see someone consumed this case study when they were in the middle of of their sales evaluation phase with one of our account executives, and know that then that lead closed faster than people who didn't receive that case study. And once I have those insights, it allows me to make much heavier investments in terms of what kinds of content we're producing, how we're promoting it, who we're targeting at different stages in our funnel with different types of content. But in order to do that, I need to make some decisions around how we call someone a member of a campaign or a piece of content. If they clicked the link on the email that went them to the webinar registration page, am I going to count that? Or do they have to actually register for that webinar for me to say that they're interested in that content and that email was successful? Do I look at just, did they view a blog during a certain stage, or did they actually click through that blog to a call to action or take another action after that? I also have to look at, to consider these webinar leads right now off of today, do I get to count everyone who registered for this webinar today as, and attribute revenue eventually down the funnel back to this webinar? Or can I only count it for the people who are attending right now, for you all? All these questions are things that we have to start to talk about and answer. But once we have this right structure in place and we have it standardized across our system, I can use multi-touch attribution to tell me exactly what programs and what content pieces are working the best all the way down the funnel. And of course, then that opens up the way that I'm going to do marketing and build my campaigns. This is the fun part, right? Is I can create new targeted ad campaigns or nurturing programs or email blasts to very specific people and know that they're going to work. And so I can say social media managers who are in the qualified stage of my funnel, I really want to send them this case study about how a social media manager over at Lenovo has been able to drive more deals. And if I can send them that case study, I know they have a much higher percentage chance of converting. And all of a sudden, it makes it a lot more fun to me to do email marketing rather than just getting a bunch of unsubscribes every time I send out an email. And of course, ABM is a big hot topic right now. And maybe it's a little bit too much of a hot topic, who knows, but everyone's doing it in some form or another. At the end of the day, we want to know at an account level, where are our leads? Because sales sells accounts. And in marketing, I'm looking at leads, and I need to marry those two things together. Not only so that I can attribute revenue back to, to the right touches, but also just that I'm sending people to the right places. So of course, from my database, I need to know if a lead is matched with a company that's currently in my database. I need to pull all that company data onto my leads. And I need to send that lead to the account owner that's already working that account rather than a net new lead that's going to get picked up by SDRs and then eventually go over to AEs. But if I can turn all of this on, eventually my whole lead routing process becomes a lot more effective. And I'm not sending kind of waste of time leads over to my SDRs and they're calling down on companies that are already being worked. I can send the right contact info straight to account executives and actually make their jobs more productive because now they have more names in their system. Again, it also opens up more correct revenue reporting all the way through my funnel. Because if there was a lead who's not actually maybe the decision maker on account, but they viewed a webinar about Socedo, and then they went and talked to their manager and said, hey, look, I saw this. Did you know Socedo could do that? And then all of a sudden that deal closes. Well, guess what? I want that revenue to go back to that webinar, even if it wasn't necessarily the decision maker on that account. But if I'm looking at every lead in my system and attributing those on an account level, all of a sudden that revenue gets back to the right programs. So I'll talk a little bit about how we implement an ABM strategy here at Socedo in a second. So let's start with the basics. And these are just our own best practices, or not even our best practices. These are just how we manage our data here at Socedo. Hopefully this kind of sparks some ideas, and I'd love to hear some ideas or questions coming back at you that we can talk about at the end of the webinar as well. So we use a tool called Clearbit. I'm a huge fan of Clearbit. If you haven't looked them up yet, please do after this webinar. And trust me, they're not telling me to say this. I just actually really love them. We started using them a couple months ago, and it's really been awesome. So Clearbit's a pretty open API, and they're a data enrichment platform. They also have some like contact name prospecting. They can do company lookups and everything like that. But really the real power, in my opinion, of Clearbit is the amount of data that they can enrich and append onto lead records. They integrate directly with Marketo, also with Salesforce and a variety of other platforms. They have a super open API, so pretty much any system you're using, you can connect directly from Clearbit. And you don't have to be too technical to use it, but you also can do some custom queries with them as well. So it's really great. So we use Clearbit to enrich any lead. Literally any new lead who comes into my system goes over through Clearbit, and on their lead record we get, accurate company name, company size, their website, contact information, as well as, more importantly for me, is like what marketing systems are they using. So instead of someone having to fill out a form and tell me that they're using Marketo, HubSpot, or Pardot, Clearbit's going to look at their website and see kind of what tracking pixels are installed. They also have some other data in their database already. And they say, all right, this company we know is using Marketo, and I can put that into my system and automatically know that this lead comes from a company using Marketo, which is super helpful, obviously, for me when I'm targeting Marketo users versus HubSpot users, sending them the right product videos about how Socedo integrates with those platforms. And of course, we want to open up some of our behavioral tracking on our leads in order to enable lead scoring like I was talking about earlier. And there's kind of two levels that I think about this. There's at the campaign level, there's also at the lead level. So at the campaign level, what I'm talking about is how well are our campaigns performing, but also who's interacting with them. So if I share a series of tweets on Twitter, I want to know all the leads in my database that are actually clicking on those links and taking those calls to actions. Not only so I can increase their lead scores and move them down the funnel, but I also want that data to go over sales, so sales can use that in their conversation and say, hey, I saw you were interested in this topic, or saw that tweet that we had last week on this new case study. What did you think about it? So at the campaign level, I want to know across all my different channels, how are people interacting with the content that I'm putting out there. So for example, we use Octopost to send our content out via social media on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook. And Octopost is great. Again, it also integrates directly with Marketo, and so I can track from my database every person who clicks on one of the links that I'm sharing through Octopost on my social media campaigns. So not only do I get the campaign effectiveness, how many people are sharing, how many people are clicking, but I also get all the way down into my database to know how many leads did I influence from this campaign on social media. Same goes through my other channels. We use WordPress as our actual content management system and our website. And so through WordPress's analytics and linking that up with Google Analytics, I know which pages, which landing pages are people actually viewing. And that's why, if you'll notice a few slides earlier, I have a lead scoring model that's looking just at people who visit the pricing page. This pricing page, our landing page here, it goes into our philosophy and pricing. It also highlights some really interesting product features. And we found that people who are visiting this page are actually pretty qualified leads. And so by looking at the success of this product page and how well it's doing, I can attribute revenue back to actually the product page itself. The same goes through all my different channels that I'm integrating my paid search campaigns. I want to know which leads are clicking on those links. And of course on these webinars and who's attending and how well is this working. Then I also want to look at the lead level. So not just the campaigns that I'm promoting, but what are my individual leads doing in my database, and how can I get that data in there? So one example is, what are people talking about on Twitter? So this is the content that I'm sending out, but what about people's own interests? What are they talking about on Twitter? What keywords are they using? What hashtags are they using? Who are they following? Are they looking at influencers? Are they following competitors? At a lead level, I can track all of that through our own system, Socedo, and actually add that as activities on leads activity logs. And then all of a sudden I know, hey, this person was talking about this conference hashtag that we're actually going to next month. Let's try to meet up with them. Let's get in contact with them. We'll have an SDR go in and call them and see if we can set up a meeting. It's also important to see these at the lead level in terms of how people are engaging with our different SEO keywords even as well. And so you can, the same kind of principles that you're putting on social media, you can look at your different channels and so say, hey, this person came from my site using different UTM tracking codes in my URLs and capturing that information. I can actually see what SEO keywords are bringing people to my site at a lead level. And so I can say this lead searched this term and wound up on Socedo.com. They must be really interested in this topic that brought them there. And of course, at the lead level, I'm also looking at unstructured data through different sources. Like, for example, everyone who asks a question here today on this webinar, I'm capturing that information, digesting it, and putting it into Marketo by, again, listening for certain keywords and certain topics and saying, hey, this person over here, they asked a question about ROI of social media. And so I know that ROI of social media must be at the top of their mind right now. Let's make sure when they're in the sales process, our SDR knows this, and they can start the conversation from there rather than one of our other talking tracks. Of course, a lot of this is unstructured data, so we have to find a way to consume it, put it into our database. A lot of this comes down to keywords. So if you think about it, taking a tweet and just pumping that tweet into a field in your database is not super helpful. Sure, I can send that tweet over to sales when they're talking to the lead. They can use that tweet, they can reference it. But as a marketer at scale, I can't really use that tweet. What I can do is dissect that tweet for keywords, pull out the ones that I know are valuable to me, like hashtag social media, and start to count those activities. So rather than taking the actual full data set of the tweet, I can look at kind of a subset of that data and say this hashtag was used, so I want to track that at a lead level. And finally, kind of one of our best practices are actually around not updating data. And so we have a blog post that's actually live today, this morning on our blog that goes a little bit more into detail on this. So I encourage you to check it out, blog.socedo.com. But a couple of things that we're doing is that I have sources set up to only update in certain ways. So for example, one of my primary metrics that I look at, I've mentioned several times already, is number of employees. It really matters to me because it matters who I'm sending it to on the sales team. And of course, we capture this information in a lot of different ways. I get it directly through Clearbit, but I also get it through my form fills. And sometimes I get it through third-party data sources, through different cost per lead programs that I'm buying other data from. Well, I know over time that Clearbit is giving me the most accurate data in terms of company size. So Clearbit always gets priority in my database to update that field. And once that field is updated, if someone fills out a form and says their company size is 65 versus 50, what I have in my field, I'm not going to update it. I'm going to give Clearbit the preference here. And unless that data is empty, form fills are not allowed to update my number of employees field. Same goes for phone number, actually, in my own database. So, we ask for a phone number on every form that I have set up in Marketo, and usually that's the most accurate one. Some people might lie and just put 555 a bunch of times, but for the most part, the phone number field is pretty accurate. And so I trust it when someone's coming in through a webinar or through a white paper, and they say what their phone number is. And if someone signs up for a free trial, they also have to submit a phone number in order to sign up for a free trial. Now, interestingly enough, and I don't know why this is, but for some reason, when people are signing up for a free trial, they have a higher tendency to lie on their phone number than when they just filled out a piece of content to actually download a white paper. I don't know why it is. I wish there was a reason, but for some reason that exists. And so I actually take that phone number that I'm getting through a free trial sign up and I put it into a separate field. It's called main phone field in my database, and I keep it over there. And once I decide to pass a lead over to sales, the phone number field itself takes precedent. That's the one that's going to go over. And I will also pass over main phone number, the secondary field, just in case that other one is fake. But I'm not going to update a field because I know that that phone number field is probably more accurate. So blocking these different field updates from different sources and keeping fields in kind of separate holding fields is super helpful. It's actually kind of made our database a lot cleaner. Finally, I actually blocked the way data is updated it all together by creating kind of walls in my database. And so one of the biggest walls, of course, is between marketing and sales. Once a lead is over in sales, they're a converted lead in terms of marketing. It's sales job now. Yes, we play a part of it in marketing, but they've already gone through my marketing funnel. Now they're in the sales funnel, which means I need to kind of lock things in place once that happens. So one of the most important fields for me to lock once a lead is converted is their last touch field. What is the last touch that brought someone over to a sales rep? It might be this webinar, it might be a white paper, it might be they viewed a case study, whatever it is. I need to kind of lock that in place for two reasons. One, so that if the salesperson's working that lead, they have a frame of reference for how that lead got to them. But also for reporting, much more important, I need to know what are my conversion rates for my different lead sources. So if this lead came in through a case study versus a webinar, that affects the conversion rate. And that, if that lead eventually closes, on which one's going to get the higher attribution. And so by kind of locking that in place and not allowing field updates to source field once a lead is converted over to a sales lead, it helps me do more accurate reporting. Otherwise, things would continue to change as that lead continues to consume content. All right, so everything we just talked about, how does it actually work on social media? Well, the cool thing about social is that it's kind of like a demand gen channel, just like email, just like paid ads, just like your website, except it opens up a whole lot more. And so a few things that I like to look at in social media is what are people interested in? People are spending at least 2 hours a day on social media, and it's often a more personal channel. So they're going to express their real interests, their real pain points. If they're having a bad Marketo day, like I have sometimes I'll tweet hashtag Marketo fail. That's actually a pretty interesting data point to any of Marketo's competitors, right? Or if I'm like, if I'm an email marketer and my unsubscribe rates are through the roof, or I'm just like really having a bad day, I might just tweet something like, I hate hashtag email marketing. Well, all of a sudden, if there's a product out there that enables better email marketing, they're going to want to pick that up. So a lot of interests exist on social media that are really useful to marketers. Also, frequency of engagement. Social media is a day-to-day action and also often multiple times in a day. And so we can see how often is someone engaged with an influencer, with a competitor, with our own brand handle. Are they still warm or not? And that can help us know where they are kind of in the buying cycle. And finally, social media offers proactive social outreach. So instead of a channel, a purely inbound channel, kind of like email or website where we have to wait for people to come to us, social media opens up the opportunity to reach right out to them. And so if I'm doing accurate reporting on who someone is on social and what they're interested in, I can be a lot more effective in the way that I target people proactively, using my social media manager's time to create a list of people that they should be retweeting, engaging with, replying to, as well as my SDRs as they have leads in the pipeline about how often they should be engaging with someone on social media. So there's pros and cons to using social. The pro is that it's all user data. It's all of their own. They're the ones inputting it. That's also the con. So the nice thing about a purely user-owned channel is that it's accurate and up-to-date. If I change jobs, the first thing I'm going to do is go onto Twitter and Facebook and change my job, and of course LinkedIn, and change my job title and the company that I'm working for, because I want that up-to-date. That's my public profile. Whereas a lot of these data providers, that data can come stale very quickly. They might only be checking job titles and everything once every few months. My form fields, of course, that's only going to get updated once someone comes back to my site and signs up again for something with a new job title. But the con of all of this is that it's really unstructured. When we talk about unstructured data, that's all social media is. Job title doesn't exist anywhere as a field, except for LinkedIn, but like on Twitter, job title doesn't exist as a field. It's just something people put in their profiles. I say, I'm the marketing manager at Socedo. But I could also call myself the demand gen manager. I could call myself demand gen guru. I could call myself Marketo nerd. Whatever I might say on there, it could be a whole wide variety of things. Also, my whole profile is a piece of data. So I have to be able to parse that down and listen for things like demand gen job title. A tweet, as we've already talked about, is it's a great indicator of interest, but I have to listen for those specific hashtags in order to take that data, put it into fields. So one thing that we like to say, more than anything, once you start using social data in your database, the first things to standardize on are job titles and locations. You might have a pick list on your forms that say, here are different job functions, which one are you in? You want to be able to translate job titles that come in through social media that could have a wide variety of different kind of variations in it, and be able to translate those into one standardized set of values. And so, for example, I might say anyone who comes in with the word content in their job title, I'm just going to call them content marketing manager. Or anyone who comes in with either search, SEO, I'm just going to call them a search marketing manager. And then one really interesting point to look at in social media is that we have to be wary of how much we're tracking and where we're going to put that data. So social media, again, we're talking about over 300 million users on Twitter. We're talking about billions of tweets. We're talking about just a massive amount of data, and how do we want to consume it? Well, we can't really create a custom field in our database for every single data point, for every single tweet, for every single hashtag, for every single job title field, for every single kind of profile information. We want to look for the ones that are very specific for us. So, for example, I don't need to know every tweet that someone, that one of my leads is tweeting. What I do need to know is what's the tweet that brought someone to my site? What's that last touch tweet? And so by using tools like Octopost for tracking campaign management and for Socedo for social lead monitoring, I can kind of hook those two things together, and I can say, all right, here's the last tweet that either I promoted or someone else promoted that brought someone to my website and turned them into a lead. That tweet I want actually in a field so that we can reference it. However, every time someone interacts with my brand handle, I don't need all of those tweets in fields, and I don't want to keep updating this other tweet field. All I want are different activities. I just need it time-stamped, so that way I can see frequency, recency of that behavior for lead scoring. So if I see that someone has tweeted at Socedo app 5 times in the last week, and they're still in my prospect stage, they're actually probably ready for a sales conversation. So I want to send them straight to sales. Versus someone who hasn't tweeted, who used to be really active but hasn't tweeted for us in a month, they might be going cold, and that might be a little alert I need to send to a sales rep. I don't actually need to know what each of those tweets are. I can listen for other keywords like Socedo sucks if someone is saying negative things about us. And of course, our social media management team is always looking at different mentions for us, and we can highlight specific issues. But from a lead scoring and lead routing perspective, all I need to know is frequency and recency. So I don't need a field for it. All I need is the lead record and the activity log, and I can just timestamp each time things happen. And so one thing you want to start to do when you're building out a database, especially for social media, is think about how am I going to consume this data in a way that's effective for me. So, again, like when I sync, leads from Socedo straight into my database, they come with those descriptions. What are their profile descriptions? Well, guess I probably already have their job titles through Clearbit, through other data providers. So I don't necessarily need to parse out their job titles from those descriptions. So I'm not going to save that into an actual field in Marketo. What I will do, though, is listen for certain keywords, including company name, as well as different interest hashtags that I'm already tracking in my system, and capture that data into certain activity log fields. So Socedo is just one solution to be able to capture all of this data. Socedo does it in two different ways. One is through prospecting. Socedo as a platform itself actually listens for both demographic and behavioral data, all based on keywords. So we listen for what is someone tweeting, what are the different hashtags someone's using, the different influencers that they're following, as well as how are they describing themselves in their profiles, what kinds of keywords are they using for job titles and those types of things. And then we kind of scour Twitter and prospect and bring back leads based off of those different keywords. Then we can sync those leads into your database and add on other social data like social profiles, as well as third-party data like their corporate information, and of course we'll send in those relevant activities like did they click a link or not, did they follow me back or not. And this way you can filter down to the most qualified leads by adding all of this data in there and send the best social leads over to your sales team. Socedo also enables social lead monitoring to look at organic behaviors. So we can track, if there's a keyword that's really relevant to you, or a conference that you're going to that's coming up, or an influencer that's really big in your space, you can listen to all of those different keywords and hashtags and handles on Twitter and find all the leads in your database that are actually engaging with those, add those to their lead records, and you can send them relevant content. You can move them faster through the pipeline. You can convert the leads off of them by starting the conversation with sales. You can send them straight to a sales rep, and they can actually reference those activities. Hey, saw you were interested in this influencer. Did you know we actually have content around it? Let's chat about it. So outside of Socedo, there's a couple of resources that are good next steps if you are interested in learning a little bit more. One is on our own site. We have a white paper called Build a Social-Minded Lead Scoring Model that talks a lot about these different data values specifically in social media and how you might want to track them and capture them and actually use them in your database. But also all of this whole idea of a marketing database has been around since the 90s. And a little book called Strategic Database Marketing by Arthur Middleton Hughes. We're on the 4th edition now, but the first edition was back from '95, and this is kind of the actual book that created the entire field of marketing operations, and it's still pretty useful today. So if you are interested in learning how to create a segmented database, how to listen for certain fields, how to do lead scoring, this is a great book to kind of look up. And with that, we only have 5 minutes left for questions, but I will answer a couple. Oh, really cool point actually coming in from Savina here. They do what they call job role normalization, which is something I've heard from a couple of other of our own customers actually when we talk about this with them. So what a lot of people do, a lot of companies, they have two separate fields. They have job title, but then they also have job role or job function. And that one's the one that actually takes preference in terms of building personas, segmenting leads, figuring out who this person is, are they a decision maker or not. And so the job title is kind of the unstructured field that takes all the data. I'd call myself demand gen manager versus marketing guru, et cetera, et cetera. But my job role field would be marketing, or maybe like manager marketing or something like that, which is a great way to kind of keep the segmenting data you need separate, but you can also keep the job title field in your database. Great. So great question coming in here from, I believe, Tomi. What's your advice for enriching data for companies that have many locations and subsidiaries? An option like Clearbit doesn't seem to be the best option because it's tied to headquarters location. Yeah, so that's a great question actually, especially on account level. So like for example, if we take a really big company like GE, where they might have a lot of different kind of locations or other headquarters actually in different regions, headquarters. Obviously just knowing the the GE's corporate headquarters over in Connecticut might not be helpful for you to know where this lead actually is. So what I will say is actually on that point, Clearbit actually does look at the lead's location in addition to the company location. So that is an option for you. Most data providers will provide you with both the main company location as well as this lead if they can get it through IP addresses and whatnot. But that does bring up another point, is that when we're looking at lead locations, really one of the most accurate ways to look at it is through their IP address once they hit your website. So drive traffic to that website, drive some inbound traffic, and then use a tool like Marketo or another marketing automation platform to do inferred locations based off of where their IP address is located when they visit your website. And I will say, actually, internally here at Socedo, inferred location actually takes precedence for us versus actual, stated location. So if someone's visiting us from Australia, but their company is headquartered, maybe even they are headquartered in San Francisco, Australia would still take precedence because that's where the lead is. We want to make sure they're sending them content at the correct time, in the correct languages or whatever. What is the main driver that brings a company's sales team to the social media table? Patricia, that is a fantastic question. Let me try to parse it out here and make sure I'm answering it correctly. So there's a couple of points to this. One is like, how do we get sales buy-in in terms of social media as a driver of growth and accelerating the lead pipeline altogether? That comes through pure ROI calculation. And so what we've done even internally, and I'll just kind of give an example right now. And so, I'm at the benefit of being at a company that loves social media, obviously. So my buy-in for sales teams using social data and everything is pretty easy. But even I run into some problems. So, with Jack, our VP, great guy, really gets the vision. But, when we implemented our new lead scoring a few weeks ago, I wanted to put in certain hashtags into our lead scoring model as bottom funnel hashtags that would count someone closer to MQLs. And at first he pushed back on me and said, no, we're not going to do that because my sales team can't actually use that as conversation data. SDRs won't be able to just use those hashtags as conversations. But then what I did is I actually did an analysis, and I took my entire database and I said, all right, I'm gonna group this into two buckets. I'm going to say, for this hashtag, I picked the Marketing Nation Marketo Summit hashtag Marketing Nation, because I know that those have always been good leads for us. So I picked that hashtag and I said, here's all the leads who have engaged with this hashtag in some way or another. In our own system, Socedo is tracking this. And what is their conversion rate all the way down the funnel and even into revenue versus people who did not engage with the hashtag, what's just the norm. And we actually found about a 25% higher conversion rate all the way down the funnel and even into revenue. And so I was able to put that one on to our lead scoring model. I did that with a few other hashtags. So that's one aspect of it, just getting the buy-in. Then of course there's the social media, the team side of it. Like, how do you get actual sales reps to use social media? How do you get SDRs to be using social data or social prospecting, which is kind of like a whole other area of discussion. What I will say, we do have a really good webinar on it called How to Turn More Leads into Conversations that my colleague Nate does. But basically the short answer here is that it's all about more leads. It's all about more leads. When you kind of open the valve in terms of these social leads, we kind of open it step by step. And so what we've seen a lot of customers do is that they'll pick one SDR, kind of a champion, or one account executive and say, hey, we're going to send you 25% more leads, and they're just going to be social leads. Just people who engage with us socially or that we prospected through Twitter and then, took one of our MQL actions. We're going to send you these leads and see how it works. And once you start to prove some success, first month, second month, third month, then all of a sudden more and more of your sales reps start to want these leads. And it kind of grows throughout the organization. And that is one strategy that we've seen kind of a lot of people using. Hopefully that answers your question. I'm not quite sure. But with that being said, we are past noon here, so I'm going to go ahead and end this webinar. But thank you so much for joining us. This actually was a record attended webinar for us, so I'm super happy. Hope this was helpful. As always, please do follow up if you have additional questions. You can reach me anytime at adam@socedo.com. Otherwise, have a great day.